Aloha, friends, and welcome back to this week's episode of The Embodied Healing Self with my beautiful friend, coach, and okay, hold on, I'm going to start over. Go. Aloha, friends, and welcome back to this week's episode of The Embodied Healing Self. So, this week's beautiful guest is a friend and coach and healer. Her name is Amy Guerrero. She is the owner of Thrive in Recovery and is here to support her mission through transcending addiction. She considers herself trauma-informed through her own life experiences. She brings in her training from plant medicine, nutrition, somatic experience, breath work through the Vegas polyvagal, tapping, EFT tapping, yoga, and holistic wellness to serve her clients and support them and guide them to living a happy and healthy life through sobriety. So I'm super excited to share her with you today. One of the things that I have loved and been honored to witness about her journey, which we started together about 2 years ago when we were in a program together, is that really what sets Amy apart is her ability to see the bigger picture in helping people to heal their relationship with their sobriety wherever they are on their path. And she has an understanding of the importance of connection to source, the importance of healing the physical body with nutrition, the importance of transcending self-limiting beliefs and emotional healing in the heart, the importance of connection and having relationships with people that support you. She understands the energy body. She understands healing through yoga. I mean, she has such a wide variety of gifts and talents that she's able to pull from that really creates an amazing experience for even those of us like myself who haven't struggled with addiction to substances. But as I listen to her speak on her Instagram, Thrive in Recovery, I'm always learning something about myself and my relationships in my life. So I'm super excited to share her with you today, and I just want to thank you. She's coming to us from California. Amy, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Jen. While I was sitting here receiving what you were saying, I just want to thank you for seeing me. It feels really amazing to feel that flow. And I have to admit, when you're the person that I've done all these things, like all of that's real. Mm-hmm. And I will still maybe, instead of saying thank you, I love hearing that. I might have a tendency to kind of deflect some of that. Like, oh, hasn't everyone been to yoga teacher training and nutrition school?
Yeah. And I just want to thank you for receiving it. In fact, what's so funny, honestly, for our listeners is that as I opened up the space to start this conversation, I actually became paralyzed with my words for a moment because I really was in such awe of your energy when I became fully present with you that I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so amazing. And quite honestly, what the experience was for me is how much of a reflection of myself I see in you. We've both come on quite a journey in different ways. We're both yoga teachers. We've both done holistic health coaching and plant medicine and energy work. And we have this understanding of emotional healing through the patterns that show up in our subconscious, healing through trauma. I've had a health crisis. You had your own. Well, we both our experiences almost took us to near death. We have that in common. We're both willing to show up and do the work. And so as I began the conversation, I actually became overwhelmed with this feeling of gratitude to be in a space to share someone as beautiful as you and see that it's a reflection of me, which I'm receiving. Thank you. And, that the work that we're doing looks different, but that we both have such a deep understanding of the bigger picture in an individual's healing, but then also how it serves the unity consciousness. And so I just wanted to share that, because as we started, I was like, I've never done this before, but I gotta like actually start over. And that is actually what happened in that moment. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So thank you for receiving that. I know. Okay, so now that we're all like mushy and lovey,
Yes.
thank you, the listeners, for holding the space for us to just have that little girl love moment for a second. I really am excited to share the work that you do. And for the listeners, I really invite you, first and foremost, to follow her on Instagram. It's Thrive in Recovery with Amy Guerrero. She has the most amazing way of delivering messages through her story and her feed, where you can read the text. She's super real and authentic. And the beautiful part is that she always relates a part of sobriety, because that's the niche that you are serving, but into real life and how it affects us in the many, many different ways. And so what I noticed about what you share is that it's also about us and our human condition and the patterns and the beliefs that we have that show up, that may look like addiction to substances, or it may look like addiction to overeating, or it may look like addiction to spending money. It might look like, addiction in some way, which eventually leads to a breakdown, right? A breakdown in health, a breakdown in your marriage, a breakdown in your finances or whatever. And I love that you hold that vision so clearly for people, because it invites people to come in and listen and relate in many different areas of life. And I really just want to acknowledge you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, my whole thing is you can transcend the addiction. However, no one gets to transcend the human experience.
I love that. And actually in this moment, as you're saying that, the podcast that I recently recorded was really kind of a harsh truth around being super clear with your energy and your words and your actions, and not looking for the easy way out, not looking for somebody to save you, not looking for those excuses that show up in those patterns, because those are part of our human condition and human experience, but we do get to choose.
Absolutely. And, what I find is that because of the way that the conditioning, I'm just going to say it, right? The conditioning of how until now, we've really seen the addiction recovery world. There is a lot of patriarchy. There is a lot of looking outside of self. There is a lot of, if you don't do it this way, you will do this. And therefore, it's sometimes even harder for someone to even be able to look at their life outside of just the way that they chose to cope. And I am going to do this in my lifetime. And it's like, you chose to cope because of things that happened way before you knew what coping was, what coping is, right? And whenever I'm holding space for someone, the first thing I ask them when they give me an experience is like, well, when was the first time you remember feeling that way? Mm-hmm. And it immediately goes back to something that happened in the formative years, mm-hmm. right? And in those formative years, those patterns are created. However, with the conditioning of the way that recovery from addiction looks now, it's like, oh, well, it was about the substance, and I am an alcoholic. I am an addict. And what I found right from the beginning is that anything that I put after I am mm-hmm. is not healthy for me. I really have to look at it. And that comes from my, all of my formative years and what happened to my little body and my little soul. And, and then ancestrally, what happened to my mother and her mother and father and all of those people that came before me. So I was clear on that when I started this journey. And many people maybe hadn't studied ancestral trauma before they decided to get sober, right? Or trauma at all. And so my whole purpose is, it's okay. This conditioning makes sense. And there's so much more. Mm-hmm. And to really experience liberation, we've got to go from the bottom up through the body, right? And in addition to that, just understand that these patterns that we've created until now served a purpose.
Yeah.
They served
Yeah.
a purpose, right? And to be grateful that, as you said, we've had these experiences where we were so close to not being here anymore
Mm-hmm.
is a gift for me. Now, did I do things that I was like, what? This doesn't make sense. Well, it didn't make sense in the
Mm-hmm.
place that I was at. And so there's so much room to stay curious instead of in judgment. However, the conditioning of the world is to judge it instead of getting really curious, to look outside of self instead of going inward, to go from the
Mm-hmm.
top down instead of the bottom up.
Yeah. And I love how you use the words to stay curious. I've heard you say that in some of your videos before. And I think that it's important to recognize that curiosity comes without attachment because attachment leads to expectation. So I know that this is something that you work with, and I just heard you say some words around that. And I know that you do some attachment adaptation work with the people that you bring into your circle, and you talk a lot about that. Can you expand a little more on how the attachment that we have to an identity, the words I am, keep us stuck in a pattern or in suffering or keep us addicted?
Mm. Yeah, that's such a great question. And when I talk about addiction, as we move into this conversation, the way that I view addiction is just looking outside of self for
Hmm.
something to feel different inside. Right. And so there's so many behaviors, there's so many substances, there's so many different ways to do that. And so when I think about the experience of staying curious, right, so that first is not conditioned in us, right? Somewhere in between, I don't know, for everyone has a different experience, but somewhere it was taught like, you can't do that anymore. It's time to grow up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that magical child in us is just like, gone. And maybe it happened even before you started pre-verbal, right? Maybe the household was so disorganized and so abusive that, even in childhood, you didn't get to experience magical child. And so being curious feels really scary. And you might go into a freeze response or a dorsal vagal state where you just can't move. You're like, you want me to be curious? Like, I have no idea how to do that. Shut down, think. How can I figure this out? How can I judge myself more? And so, the experience of understanding that we have an attachment system, right? And that attachment system was created literally in the first few days, like the birthing experience has so much to do with this attachment experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it can be difficult, especially if you or the person has experienced any kind of emotional or physical trauma, disorganization. All of these things are a part of how we learn to attach. And that's not talked about very often, right? And the beautiful people that have set this, I'm just so grateful that someone has been talking about this for a really long time and set this in motion. And now it's starting to come together of, oh, wait, this has so much to do with why. And especially in the addiction recovery model, it's something that insurance companies don't necessarily want to pay for, right? And so it's easier to talk about the disease of addiction than it is to say like, oh, wow, you created all these patterns until now based
Mm-hmm.
on how you attach. And
Right.
so just that knowledge alone can help set someone on the path of shame and guilt to the path of curiosity.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I have so much to say around when you said the words disease of addiction, it's like because we can treat that. But let's talk about where it started, right? Let's say, and it's the same thing as as you have training in health coaching too. It's like whatever patterns show up around, how we nourish and take care of ourselves. Well, there's a thought in medicine, well, let's just treat the symptom. We're so good at treating cancer, but let's really get proactive into where this all began, because that has an emotional, physical, spiritual, energetic level too. And I love how you say addiction is anything outside of yourself. When you said that, I was like, just pulling at my heartstrings, because this is really the core of everything that you do. It's a belief that we both have. We hold true to our core in the work that we do, that the inner work creates the outer results, creates the outer world, the outer experience.
Yes.
And that we do get to choose, we do get to write our own life story, and acknowledging the trauma that's been a part of our experience. We all have it at some level. And then letting go of the attachment for, even there can even be an attachment to healing, actually, that can be unhealthy, right? Attachments to someone saving you, attachments to, well, I'm doing the work. I'm going to the 12-step recovery process. I'm doing all the things. I'm in the action of doing the healing, but there's a deeper layer where we actually embody and become and believe the person who is healing, right? So I think this is the perfect moment for me to ask you, because I really want the listeners to know and understand that you are committed to this work because of your own life experience. And there have been many, many steps along the way. And you and I both took the long way. We both sort of, in a sense, got hit by a Mack truck that woke us up and decided we were going to show up differently. We were gifted courage to step into the discomfort, to seek the healing, and then even more so to actually look inside ourselves and decide, what is every experience here to teach us? So I want to invite you, because you've done the things, you've done several recovery programs. So you have your story of noticing a pattern of unhealthy behaviors, an addiction, of filling a void within yourself, and then doing the action steps, and then being so self-sabotaging that it almost ended your life, and then you had a breakthrough. So share with us a little bit about what that looked like for you.
Yes, thank you so much. I was listening to something the other day, I can't remember what it was, and it said, the person said, I don't want to work with seekers, I want to work with finders.
Ooh,
And
I like that.
I got all juicy when that was said. I was like, oh, this is so delicious, because I would say that is my path, right? So from a very young age, I started to find things, and then I kept seeking things, right? Because I was very curious, and I wanted to know that there was more, right? That whatever I was thinking in here, there was more. So I would say that, looking back, I knew that what intuition was at a really young age. And that, just because I had a hard time connecting with people around it didn't mean that it wasn't real for me. However, just like I stated earlier, somewhere along the lines, I made myself wrong and different and started judging that part of me, that I was more sensitive than anyone in my family, in my household, that, I was wrong. Like, oh, well, we have to make all these accommodations for Amy. And so I started to just build this resilience and these walls. And, I can remember even the first time that I wanted to stay home from Thanksgiving because it was just too much to be around all of those family people that I didn't really feel like I had anything in common with. And I ordered pizza, and my parents were so disappointed in me. I was so wrong. And now I can see I was just like overwhelmed and didn't know how to express it. So that's just a little background into all of that. And that led me to keep finding and keep finding and keep finding. And somewhere very young, I found alcohol and drugs. And they really helped satiate a lot of the feelings that I felt. And so, another thing that I was determined to escape myself with was, let me learn about a lot of stuff, and then let the world see how successful I am at work, at school, in my personal life, however I can, right? So I was really like, let me learn, and then let me show it off. And that just helped mask me from the world. It diluted who I really am to put something in between me and the world, which helped me feel more comfortable. Mm-hmm. So fast forward, I had a very successful career, life, made lots of money, made an imprint in San Francisco, really, really it was beautiful. It is beautiful. It's, you know, so many different things. Became a yoga teacher, practiced yoga for 20 years, did all these things. The whole time I was drinking more than average. And it was hiding something from me. It was protecting something for me. It was like, there's so much pain deep down in there that truly I was unable to really give myself to people in a complete way. You know, I was in a lot of beautiful relationships. I've been in love 4 times, and I still love these men, you know, and I was deeply unable to really show up. And now I can see so clearly that it had so much to do with my attachment system and the things that I experienced and that continued to experience, because that's all I knew. So I would find those things that kept me where I was, unable to really just receive. You know, we've talked about that so much. So again, I was using that top-down approach where I intellectually understood that I was like on this journey, but my body had no resonance to that. It wasn't connected. And therefore, all of my relationships were somewhat superficial. So at 37, I got this idea. It was like the same year that the person I was working with at the time, beautiful human that I just love now so much still, was like, we got to make decisions if you want to have kids and all of these things, because like you're coming on that age. And I was going through that process, and I also discovered during that process that I really wanted to heal all of my trauma. And I literally went around saying this before I was 40. I'm like, I'm going to heal all my trauma before I'm 40. I'm going to find my birth mom. I'm going to do all these things, and everything's going to be great. And I went on this journey, and I did not have a support network big enough to hold all of this with me. I wasn't really willing to look at my relationship with alcohol, drugs, and other ways that I checked out. And so when I went on this journey, literally 6 months into it, I woke up one morning shaking because I was having such a huge detox from alcohol. And I was like, uh-oh, what's this all about? But I'd learned at like a jazz fest, the easiest way to make that stop is to take a shot, take care of the dog, they call it, and then carry on. And so that worked for a little while. And my depression, like at this point, now I had a light on everything. And so all of that was coming up to be found. Years of things that I'd stuffed down, you know, and just thought like, I'll just not deal. Well, I made the decision to deal with it, and source listens to that, right? I mean, I can remember, you know, thinking like, if I drink enough to forget that I know this, then it'll all be okay. Like I'll wake up tomorrow and I'll forget that I know this. It became so primal.
Well, as you're saying that, I just want to like tap into what I'm noticing in my own awareness is that there is an element where it's like that is actually, it's like the gift actually that it's almost like we're resisting the very thing that we need to listen to because it's almost overwhelming. It's almost like that Marianne Williamson, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, but that we are powerful beyond measure. And what comes to me is oftentimes what I notice, and you would be the expert on this, but people who are seeking something outside of themselves to save them and really seeking a way to numb themselves out. And I want to say that this shows up as an addiction to busyness. I see this so much, like not willing to really be present with where you are and who you are. So you claim that you're too busy to take the next step to take care of yourself, right? Like I'm too busy to enroll in that program, go to the gym, learn how to eat healthy, you know, whatever. But there's really something underneath that it's all masking, just like the addiction to the substances. And although I haven't struggled on my own, I shared with you before this with addiction to substances, I will say that when I was in college, because I was in a super stressful environment, I was in a military college, that I drank myself like a fish. Like, I mean, it was amazing how much I could drink to escape where I was because it was too painful. So I do understand that concept of it. And then I eventually ended up having liver failure at the age of 28, which wasn't related to drinking. It was pregnancy induced. So it's kind of funny, but you know how that all, and that was probably a lot of emotions that were triggered by that. But what I really want to say is, like, there is this part that I noticed, that what I hear is that there's a part of us in our childhood where we know that we are sensitive to things, and that nobody has given us permission to explore that. And so we have to find a way to survive. Our survivor self comes up in the world. And so we choose a way. And so actually my way was the complete opposite of addiction, but it is an addictive behavior in a way, because I became addicted to not allowing myself to feel. Like I wouldn't even allow myself to receive or feel pleasure or try like substances that could feel good, because my survivor self had to come in and be like, that's not safe. So what I want to say is that it can show up in so many ways. And, you know, it's just so interesting, because the energy of it is like, we do things because we're born into such like a high vibration of energy, like our frequency. And then we have trauma and we have experiences that kind of lower our frequency a little bit. And alcohol and drugs do the same thing. They do that energetically. And guess what? So does junk food. Does the same thing. It lowers your vibration. And then it's almost like it feels safer for us to, because it's too overwhelming, because we haven't been. So as you're sharing your personal journey and all that stuff that came up, like, if as a parent I'm thinking, this is how I'm choosing differently. This is how you're choosing differently with your clients, right? It's like, I'm giving my kids permission, my clients. Just yesterday I had a client who actually a couple, you know, they project their outward anger sometimes to me, like, oh, I'm calling bullshit on this or whatever. And it's like, all they need is the space to be held for them to express whatever's coming up to them. And so I feel like there's a huge part of what you're saying in this, the permission to be present with the whole range of emotions that come up for us. I was a child that was, quote, too sensitive as well. So I learned to deal with it in a different way. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. Like, what is a little nugget of wisdom you could drop right now in just, you know, the awareness of how we're self-sabotaging by numbing the emotions. That behavior starts before the addiction, I think.
Oh, 100%. And, you know, what I really heard you say, if you're open to this, is that you saw that it was safer to be in control.
Yep.
Right? And that's okay. However, as we know, it's in that letting go.
Girl, you're like just speaking to me from spirit right now. That is my whole like soul's evolution in this lifetime. That was my whole pregnancy-induced liver failure, was losing control of my body with the birth of my daughter. And all I'm here to do is to learn to let go and control. It's like, you're in line. You're speaking to my, so you're absolutely, your intuition is just right on my frequency. You're absolutely right. You're calling me out, and and I know this, and it's 100% true. And that's another pattern of addiction.
Yeah. So what if the nugget of wisdom that I'd love to drop right now, right, is what if we stayed curious, and just let's take the word addiction out of here for a moment, right? And let's just say, like, wow, you created a protective part of yourself to protect something that happened, right? And that self-protection at some point stops serving you. However, it's so innately integrated into, well, really fragmented more so into who you be, that there needs a safe space to be held, to stay curious and explore that. Because a human being is, you know, not going to be able to, again, from the top down, go, oh, that's that part of me the first thing that comes out of someone's mouth when I say, oh, that's a part of you, they're like, Amy, I don't have, any kind of multi-personalities or dissociative disorder. And I'm like, whoa, like, I don't believe, first of all, in those labels. And I can see that you're really having a reaction to that.
I like to call it the triggers activations.
Yeah, little microaggressions.
They activate curiosity, the triggers.
If the nervous system feels safe to relax. Right?
Yeah.
So again, I cannot tell you anything. You felt something when I said, maybe this, you felt something. And then you were like, yes, that's the thing. However, if I just tell people what they are, then I'm buying into that model of already these things. Like, I am this, I'm going to tell you this, memorize this, say this prayer, do this thing, all outside of, right? So what I'm always looking for is, I can really see that a protector just came up. And then to gently just continue to hold that space. And to go again from the bottom up, right? Like, where do you feel that in your body? And that's a simple technique that anyone can use all day long, right? It's like, oh, I just felt something. Where was it? And then just ask your body gently, what do you want to tell me? Right? And then
body wisdom. I call it body wisdom.
Yeah. And then it starts this beautiful conversation. And again, the nervous system might say, this is too much, shut it down. And that's where support is necessary during these processes. I can't do this alone at all, and to go back to my story, I thought I could at 37. As a matter of fact, I mean, I like had my armor on, my last name Guerrero means warrior. Like, I'm going to power through this like I powered through everything else. And then I was in treatment shortly after. And in a model of treatment that, is so patriarchal, is so you are this, is so if you don't fall in line, there was no room for curiosity and exploration. And so I fell in line because I wanted to be the best student there, the best client there. But it wasn't resonating with me.
Yeah.
And so I knew that this wasn't the solution. And I had formed such deep patterns and neural pathways to the solution being outside of me that when I was deciding if I wanted to live or not, it was easier to go back to the old pathways. It was just easier. I was exhausted by that point. I mean, body, mind, spirit, exhausted. And I had no healthy way, even though I was teaching yoga, even though I was already like so studied in nutrition, even though I was already so I've been working with healers and all of the things that I'm doing, I had all kinds of rituals, all kinds of plant medicine in place. I had all of these things. Nothing worked faster and more efficiently than alcohol, Xanax, sex with somebody who was in that state of mind with me, like all that just made it go away, like profoundly. And I wasn't being offered a solution like I've created, right? I wasn't seeing anyone go, oh, wait, Amy, this is an integrative, holistic approach to how to get well and how to recover all the parts of you. And I was just like searching for that person to tell that to me. And I didn't find it. So I created it myself.
Yeah, I love that you shared that. And it really feels, what I'm feeling and hearing is like, there's also a space of just permission to just be where you are. And I don't think that we're given that enough. And one of the things that a couple things that are coming through for me is the healing is not in the doing, it's in the embodiment, which is the podcast Embodied Healing Self. Like in everything that we do, the action steps, it's great intention, but it's the actual embodiment energetically of the actions that we take. And it includes the beliefs that we have, that actually is where the real healing occurs. And nobody can do that except us. Like I can't do it for you. Only you can do it for you. Only I can do it for me. And it does help to have the guidance and support to get there. to learn to trust your intuition, to remember who you are. You talk a lot about on some of your videos. I know some of the things that you said where I'm like, yes, girl. It's like, all we're really doing is discovering our truth. That is what we are. That's actually what we're all seeking. It's not the actual recovery process, or it's not the actual losing the weight, or, you know, whatever that outward result is just there to really just keep us busy. It's actually keeping us from the thing that we really need, which is actually coming home to our truth. And I know that for me on my personal journey, that's when I had profound healing. I was given the space to, one of my two self-limiting beliefs. One is I'm never good enough. And my survivor self, just like yours, was so successful. Like, I was a badass, like, as a survivor self, right? And then there was the one, the fear of dying, because that was a thing for me. So for me, a couple of years ago, I was in the land of celebration in Virginia, where I was doing some spiritual leadership development training. I was given the space to surrender, because that's what I'm here to do. And what was so interesting, the book Waking the Tiger with Dr. Peter Levine, like, I just love that book because it talks about cellular, physiological cellular memory of the trauma, right? That's a thing, because in my near-death experience, I couldn't remember anything because I was heavily medicated. So I actually relived the entire experience, and I was willing to go to a place where I actually really believed I was going to die again. Do you know how much courage that takes?
Yeah.
Do you know what was on the other side? All of my gifts, remembering the intuition, remembering the clairaudience, like, all of it was just, as soon as I cleared that block, it was like, boom, here's your truth. And I love how you talk about from the bottom up, because in today's world, we are living too much in our thoughts. And sometimes there's also some spiritual bypassing that is too much, too much in the heart, right? I mean, okay, I'm guilty. I was checking out of my pain with medication, totally guilty a couple of years ago, right? So, you know, there's this whole movement happening right now where there is a lot of bypassing. There is a lot of looking for the easy way out. And that's why the space, the sacred space from somebody, as you so eloquently share in your videos, it's important to have somebody who knows and understands where you've been, and that you can trust, and they can hold that space for whatever comes up. And that support, you and I wouldn't be where we are with support. And support includes a community. It includes a coach or a mentor. It includes a loved one too. It includes what their experience of this is looking like, because we have these energetic bonds with the people in our life.
Yes.
So I just really wanted to, thanks. I was just like, I really wanted to just validate that whole, like, you just lit me up when you talked about, like, the embodiment of the healing. And so what are some maybe tips that you could share on what is some maybe wisdom you could share with us on the curiosity of when we might be checking out of the embodiment process? Because there's many steps that we go on in our healing journey. And then there's a point where we might even be in a place where we're actually getting some good results, but we haven't fully embodied the experience. How would you know at that moment in time? Because this is the difference between the seekers and the finders that we talked about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is the difference. As you said that, I was like, boom, like, seekers to finders. That's where the line is. So what could you tell me about that space?
So first I want to just talk a little, your listeners really understand what embodiment is, and the listeners from my place and everywhere that is listening maybe don't even really understand what embodiment is, right? So let me just start there. And the way that I put it is that when I meet people often, whether they have 1 year of choosing to live a conscious sober or a sober lifestyle, or they have 9 or 10 or 30 years of living a sober lifestyle, there is a disconnection from the body. The person that I meet is just in the head and is heavily influenced by everything that they've read, everything that they've lived, every meeting that they've been to, where they've just taken on and had this imprinted onto them without any conscious awareness of it, you know. I mean, I've literally met people that say things like, I am this. And I'm like, can you please show me some evidence that's really happened in your life that you are this? And then they give me examples from things that they've heard in recovery rooms or things that they've heard from other people. So again, it's that outside of self to think of this and I am that. So there's just no connection to the body. And so it seems so foreign to even think about what would embodiment actually be. And then all those protectors come up and all the patterns come up, and then there's that freeze response or that flight response. So getting really super busy. Yes, 100%. I talk about that very often. Or going into such a dissociation that there's a numbness. And especially with the people that I work with, that comes up in so many different ways. You know, a lot of sex, no sex, a lot of pleasure through food, no pleasure through food, which all again is control, right? But what's really happening is just a complete shutdown. So, you know, to embody something for me is like to have that resonance of like, oh, you know, when I'm working with someone and they have that, like, you know, I look at them and I just go, oh, what just happened? And they're like, oh my God, I get it. And then the most beautiful thing, especially for someone who has more of a visual response, a way of looking at the world, you know, they see things more than they feel things. Whenever someone has, or an auditory way of looking at the world, right? And they go, oh, I really felt that. And I'm like, dang, yes, let's go there. Like, that is so exciting because then that's embodying it. There's a connection of, whew, you know, and oftentimes a release, right, of some tears. And then another protector comes up, like, I can't let this woman see me cry. And I'm like, no. However, that's when I know the central nervous system has felt safe enough to allow this. And then it's all about creating more safety. Right? More safety in that moment. So how can someone do that for themselves, right? So it becomes a practice of just making a commitment, especially maybe if you, as we go into the rest of this year, right? The holidays always bring things up for people and they're right around the corner. And it's like, okay, this year, before I step into all of these commitments, I'm committed to staying curious. You know, how am I going to feel while I'm there? And maybe that's the first time. And here's the thing, listen to what happens in the belly. Listen to if the hip flexors get tight. Do the shoulders come up to the ears? Because if I walk into a room with all of that happening without coming back to my body, then it's a mess, right? I'm just like reacting to everything all night long. And there's always alcohol, sugar, and drugs at every event. So, I mean, and I always know who has them. It can be like the most highfalutin event. You think there's nothing, and I'm like, oh, they're doing blow in the bathroom. You know, like they're picking out on sugar in the corner. Oh, those people are going to go out afterwards, right? There's always a way to disconnect. And if there's not a checking in process where you can stay curious and then ask for support before you go into the events. Right. And something that I love to give to people is just, you know, put your hand on your heart and say to yourself, Amy, I am safe. Like right now, I am safe.
Yeah, I like to find a place in my body that feels good. I know that's something. So even as a parent with my daughter who has some anxiety tendencies, like anchoring in the body is so powerful. That's that somatic anchoring process. I use it with my clients as well because it takes them out of their head. And really, sometimes the heart can be overwhelming too and into their body.
100%.
Love that you share that.
Yeah, because, you know, again, there's this idea, and this is another form of control or protection, right? Is that it has to be perfect. And as soon as, you know, I have this idea that, it needs to be perfect, I'm out of my body.
Yep.
You know, there is no resonance. I'm way outside of myself. I'm looking at someone, how someone else explains it. I'm looking to, someone else's version of it instead of my truth and my intuition. And something that I feel is really important to share, especially if you're listening right now and you have had any substance disorder. I hate that word, but that's how they might have told you, right? And the way that I look at it is, maybe you used substances to cope sometime in your life.
And I like to say it's an unhealthy relationship with the
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
And even further, and this is like way, but it's an adaptation that
Yep.
I created to survive.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you've had that, maybe somewhere along the line, someone told you that you can't trust yourself. And when I first started working in the treatment facilities in this area, I was told with no uncertainty that by several people, several directors, clinical directors, that I told the clients to trust themselves too much. And that teaching them to trust themselves at that early in recovery was not a part of the process. And that kind of just blew my mind. And I didn't understand to teach them that to not trust themselves, right? Because that gets imprinted in a certain way. And maybe that's what they've been told since they were in their formative years.
Which
Maybe
might
that
contribute to relapses.
100%.
Right? Yeah.
And it takes them completely out of the body and into the thinking mind, right? And so it was a really great experiment for me to not stop saying that, right?
Yeah.
And to stay with what I know of the human body, and that's that when we go inside, then we can go outside and be that person and human and resonance of embodiment of ourself, and then share that with the world, right? And
which is all we're here to do and be.
Exactly. But to tell someone that they fundamentally, and if you've heard this, like I just pour so much love to you, because it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you made decisions to cope with things or to adapt to the way that you are feeling. However, it does not mean that you fundamentally don't trust yourself, and it's not safe to trust yourself. However, it is a bottom-up process of what am I protecting? And exactly what happened to you at that retreat in Virginia is a lot of the work that I do, right? It's that when we start to allow ourselves, when you allowed yourself to be there and to understand there, when we experience any kind of emotional, physical trauma, no matter how severe or how small it is, little t, big T, however, maybe you've heard about it, there is a protection that comes up where you don't have memories. Yeah. And, the most beautiful part about my healing process and what I just heard from you about your process is that my body trusts me and memories come up. And even just a year ago or less, I was having a lot of memories come up around when I was blacking out and trying to commit suicide. And suddenly I was like, the body thinks it's there in that moment. Yeah. And I was mad at first. And what was reflected to me was like, Amy, this is how far you've come. Your body trusts you enough to show you these memories. And I can go through them and embody them, that was actually me doing that. And then expansion on the other side. Yes. Exactly what you said.
Yes. Oh my God, I'm just covered in goosebumps because it's such a wonderful gift to have that.
Yes. And something that I want to just really let everyone know is that not only are the memories of the trauma released, I've also now been gifted all of these beautiful memories from my childhood that until now my body didn't feel safe enough to feel either. And I'll literally be like on the carousel, on the merry-go-round with my dad taking pictures of me. And like, that makes me want to cry right now because I didn't have the ability to feel that until I really stepped into this conscious sober lifestyle.
Yeah, it's like you're actually stepping into the perception of the experience from the viewpoint of unconditional love. And so that was like my experience too, is I was actually able to, because you're not in fear anymore. You're actually able to see the experience almost from your higher self and all that it held in that moment. And so I think that's so encouraging, because if people only knew that the willingness to be vulnerable is the gateway to all of like the wonderful gifts too, if they could just trust that, rather than being paralyzed in the fear of what if I allow myself to go to that super ugly place, like what's it going to be like for me to experience my deepest fear? What is that going to look like?
Yes.
But that is also an attachment to an expectation that is limiting us, because what if it's way better than you ever imagined, which is actually usually probably what it is, right?
Well, yes, 100%. And what I remind people of, especially early on in the process, like I'll have a call with someone and they're just like, I don't know. And I'm like, it's okay. You don't have any history yet to really show that to you. And until now, you've been looking outside of yourself for that history that doesn't necessarily resonate with you because you're not living it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that willingness to lean into that vulnerability and go, I have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, so many different phases of this development for me has been like, I have no idea what's going to happen. And am I willing to stay curious and continue to lean into this and, invest in high levels of support
Mm-hmm.
to go, oh, like this makes so much sense. And in that high level of support, there is a loving presence of you can go further and you're stopping yourself. Do you want to stop doing that? And the choice is always mine. The choice is always of my clients,
Mm-hmm.
right? When someone is up against something and they want to collapse, it's my journey with them to just continue to hold the space,
Mm-hmm.
to stay out of the expectation of what I want for them too, right?
Yeah.
And go like,
Yeah.
you've got a choice right now.
Yeah. And like there is no better gift in the world from the viewpoint of receiving that support than to really allow yourself to discover the truth of who you are. Again, I say that because you've said that before, because like this is your life story. Don't you want to know everything it's about? And not only that, but from my perspective, as you and I talked about before this, like there are things that I don't want to rewrite for my children. And it's taking the willingness for me to go, and they chose me knowing that I would do this, knowing that I had the courage to break that pattern so that they could be the ones to rewrite our karmic, energetic DNA, whatever. And I know that's why I'm here. And so what I say that to say that our healing is so much more than just our own personal experience. Like we have energetic ties to everybody who listens to you on Instagram, right? Like now your healing is impacting at this current moment, I think you have like 13,000 people. It just keeps going up, but like they're listening to you. So your willingness to heal is now making a ripple effect in such a big way. And sometimes we don't even know that we're doing that. Sometimes you don't have to be somebody who has an account that's, that's creating this business and transforming lives. You can be the healer in your family. You can be the one that's rewriting right now in this moment for your kids, for their kids, for the love that you want to bring into your life. You can decide right now to rewrite that story. But Amy and I are here to tell you that you have to be willing to embody the experience on your own. And there is no greater gift. I think we both have similar coaching methods, than a coach that will hold the highest vision of you until you're ready to receive it. Because anybody who's giving you answers or who's here to quote save you is actually might be making it about them, first of all, but also is really disempowering you. There's so much empowerment in being in the space of a coach that is willing to hold that space with you to go to the deepest depths of your shadows and really get super clear on what that is. become unparalyzed, but then also to gently guide you to just holding the space for you to choose your path, because your higher self knows what's best for you. And that's empowering. And I love that you shared all that. I'm just kind of confirming everything that you're doing, because this comes through in every video that you do. Like I know the underlying messages because I do similar work, right? So I'm like, man, she's tapping into all that stuff. And so I want to just say, I want to ask you if you have any nuggets of wisdom to share before we go. But as we wrap this up, I just want to say that, like, there are a lot of layers to this journey, and that you do such a beautiful job of holding the space with all of your training and your experiences and the courage that you had to go to take the long way that gave you all those different tools along the long way, just to be able to hold the space in case somebody happens to be in one of those little, sideways paths that come off the main path. Like, you hold such a beautiful space for deep healing on so many levels, that I just want to encourage anybody who's listening right now, because I know that I have clients that this is a thing in their life. Like, they've either struggled with, they know, okay, even to show up as the best versions of themselves, to start a business, to raise their vibration, they want to they want to eat healthy. Well, then there's the part, I haven't had a drink in 6.5 years. I mean, that's, I do not feel the need or attachment to drink socially, but people will say to me, oh, well, what do you do then? Or you're just too healthy or whatever. It's like, actually, it's pretty fun to watch everybody else
Totally.
and remember it. But you know what? I'm good. Like, I'm good. But I know that I have people that I'm working with right now, and if you're listening, who are curious about the attachment or the need to have a drink when they're at a family function, or they're in a social setting, or, they're just addicted to, they're actually really just not comfortable with who they are in certain settings. And I have clients who might have a partner or be in a relationship or a marriage with somebody who struggles with this. And we're here to say that this is a valid thing, and that Amy understands the deeper layers. And not only that, but what we didn't talk about is you also understand post sobriety struggles. You talk about that. Like, okay, so now I'm sober, so now what, right? That's a whole nother thing. And the connection of the people around you supporting you, because that's an important thing too. So I really encourage you guys to just start, if this resonates with you, to start listening, because this is progressive healing. It takes courage, it takes commitment, it takes discomfort. But if you really want to be the person who completely transforms your life, if you struggled with addiction to substances in any way, then I invite you to just start being curious about how Amy is sharing her journey, because I think it's wonderful. And like I said, my listeners know that I haven't struggled in the same way that you have, but we all have our things. And I have learned so much from what you share. So
thank you.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so beautiful, because that's the whole thing. It's the now what part is what stops people from even exploring the, maybe I'll go 6.5 years without having a drink, and really not even, but what will I do when those feelings come? So it's interesting, because the now what is so important to all levels. If someone's sober, curious, right? And here's the thing, again, that's how I know that has nothing to do with the substance. Mm-hmm. Just nothing, because it's like already the thoughts of like, oh, if I give that up, then are coming up. Mm-hmm. And that's all about the now what, right?
Yeah.
And there's just, so much beauty in going, oh, there are answers for this. And that's why I include all of the different integrations of mm-hmm. the whole self, that, if we're not talking about it, I was at a collaboration last week of all professionals in recovery. Most everyone worked at a treatment center. And it was so interesting. We all collaborated, so we all could teach on things that we wanted to teach about. And I I taught something on sex and intimacy, and I taught something on
I listened to that video and I loved it.
Thank you.
It's all
Yeah,
about the embodiment again. Like,
exactly. Yeah, and I taught something on pain and grief. And if there's two things our world is afraid to talk about, it's pleasure through sex and intimacy and pain and grief.
amen.
So guess what? Out of the 60, 65 people that were there, those were like attended 2 to 3 people each. And it was very noticed from people outside of me that like, look at how few people are willing to have this conversation. And I'm here to tell you, like, I am, because these are the things that matter. And these are the things that will keep you out of your body.
Yes. 100%. Do you know and I'm an Enneagram 7. So this is a practice for me because I love to be in the space of funness and not pain. However, every time I'm willing to go to what is this here to teach me? I mean, it just transcends, as you say, transcend addiction. It transcends any belief that I ever even thought I had. Like it is such a thing, and not just the pain, but also in the pleasure.
Oh yeah.
It's such a thing. Like I loved when you shared that. I loved that. I watched your IGTV on that, and I was like, that's the embodiment again. Be in your body and allow yourself to feel the pleasure. Like you're given permission to feel it, and allow yourself to feel the pain too. And that is when support really helps, is being in the space that can be held with compassion and also safety at the same time. You know, that balance of nurturing safety without enabling, like that whole, it's a super sacred space to be in. And I know that you do it beautifully. So
thank you. Yeah.
I love what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love having this conversation, and I appreciate you seeing me in so many ways. And to bring it full circle, you know, this is truly receiving and being in flow.
Yep.
You know, people ask me all the time, like, how to achieve happiness, and that's a very individual experience. However, just in these moments with you, like so much flow, so much happiness is being received. And, you know, I really want to just, whoever's listening, you know, to feel that with us right now, because receive this, right? However it lands on you is perfect and complete. Exactly. Whatever you heard, you can come back and take more later. You can leave what didn't resonate with you, and then just feel into it. Ask yourself, like, where do I feel this in my body? And stay curious in that moment.
I love that. And so there's so much to say about the healing process, just being present to receive rather than taking all of the to-do list actions. You know, I'm going to drink my green juice. I'm going to go do yoga. I'm going to get a massage. I'm going to do this. But then if you're not fully embodying that and connected all the way down, you're not actually really like having that experience. Like in your mind you are, but the body isn't. So, and the body is why we're here. I mean, you and I both know, because we had near-death experiences. So the body is the vehicle of our transformation, of our life story. It holds our soul. Like the body is why we're here. I love that. Amy, it's been so wonderful to connect with you. I love that our paths crossed. It's been such an honor to witness you stepping into this journey, and just how much you've transformed and the community that you've created. It's wonderful. I love it. And it's just such an honor to share you. And I want to invite you to share, how can people find you? Do you have any upcoming events or anything as a way to people that can find you?
Yes, absolutely. So yes, this year I started doing some live events here in Malibu. So I have one coming up on November 2nd and December 7th. And you can go to my Instagram account at Thrive in Recovery with Amy to check that out. There's an Eventbrite about it as well. So if you do live in the greater Los Angeles area, these workshops are called You're Sober Now What? Right? And so it's just this beautiful experience of coming together, and I actually tailor them to who is showing up in the room. So I create content based on what's actually going on in your life, you know, so that's just a beautiful thing. And I'm going to bring that into an online format as well. And then, you know, I really truly believe in this interaction. So I love video, because then people can get to know me, my energy. And I know it's scary. I know it's scary to even admit that you might need support or want support or have a desire for support. So come get to know me at Thrive in Recovery with Amy, Facebook, Instagram, and then my website is a beautiful way to maybe hear some of your experiences that you're having now and go, wow, this woman really gets it. And I'd like to have a conversation with her. So I'm here, and all it takes is clicking on that link and saying, yes, I want to have this conversation. And then we get to do this together. And, it's a beautiful way to get to know maybe even more about yourself as well.
Mm. And also, there's so much value in being supported and finding a community of people so that you know that you're not alone, that your experiences are validated. You don't have to hide them. I just found in my own experience that there is a lot of power in that. So I just love that you have created that.
Yeah, and something that I do on Monday nights and Thursday nights is just a live Q&A. And, it's beautiful because people come in and ask questions, and, other people get to listen to those questions and go, oh, I was thinking that same thing. And exactly what you said, all this connection is made. All of this felt sense of like, ooh, I'm understood. I'm understood. And feeling misunderstood is a response to trauma. It's okay. However, when we're together, like I say often, together we thrive,
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you for being here. You're such a beautiful person inside and out.
Thank you. I feel really blessed to be here and appreciate your journey and being beside you, in so many ways as we walk through this together.
Thank you. I am receiving that.
Awesome.
All right, sister. Well, thank you. Thank you to all the listeners for sharing this sacred space from us today. And we're just holding the intention that something that we share today will be there to guide you and support you wherever you are in your journey from a place of unconditional love. So thank you for being here. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Aloha.